Hello, sports fans. This is Eric Johnson, the brand.
And Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source.
Hello, everyone. Aaron, today's topic is the importance of arm care, and especially during this time of the year. We're into this April season here, and there's been a lot of different sports going on. And I've noticed in baseball, we have a lot of dead arms or aching arms. Better than that, in any sport, because I've been talking to a lot of different coaches, we have had different injuries. And I don't know, what's going on with the dead arm or these minor aches and pains or a slight elbow or muscle tendinitises. Everything is kind of different.
Yeah.
What's your take on that, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm running into more kids who are talking about the dead arm syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, one, you've got different classifications of athletes. You have those who didn't do anything over COVID.
Right.
So, of course, they're going to have some issues. Then you have the ones that did work out over COVID.
Okay.
And they're having those issues. And a lot of it, I think, stems from the intensity and the volume of throwing that these athletes undertake right away.
Right.
In instances, that's the case, especially with those athletes who have already been training. Because those athletes who've been training have, a physical foundation.
Right.
But I don't think they've followed proper protocol in ramping their arms up to be able to throw at high velocities on a regular basis. Those who haven't done any off-season training, that's a whole nother subject.
Right.
And they're going to be really deep in the hole. The question is, how do you deal with that and how do you get out of it when you've got now the season that you're in, and then for some, maybe a short break, and then immediately into the summer? That's the dilemma that most of these athletes are facing that are having this problem. The first thing I would say is you've got to, even though you're in season, you've got to monitor the number of throws that you have.
Right.
And I'm talking globally. I'm not just talking about
Right.
if you're a pitcher. I'm talking about, if you're a position player, how many throws are you accumulating during the course of a practice or a course of a week?
Right.
And maybe you might need to modulate the intensity of those throws. Maybe not everything is throwing gas. And maybe it's only a couple of days. And maybe there's only a certain percentage that you're throwing high velocity. Because I think athletes are running into the wall because of the high velocity throwing.
Right. I agree with you 100%. What I've found out is that when kids are playing catch or doing any of their exercises, since they have been playing for a while now, they're kind of going at it kind of half speed in terms of arm care prior to throwing, cool down after throwing. If their arm is really bothering them, it's probably the way they're warming up initially. And I find that athletes, at least in our club, that are having trouble aren't banding correctly, and it's just really quick, or they're not warming up their bodies enough to get it warmed up properly, heated up to where it can get off a throw. So when they do make a high intensity throw, their body's not warmed up enough to make that throw.
Right.
And then, thirdly, when kids are throwing, and I tell coaches this all the time, and I really try to monitor all our throwing in practices. Watch your kids throw, how they warm up initially. They should be throwing easy at the beginning. Their first 45, 30, 45, 60 feet, 90 feet, those are easy loosening up throws. I always have our club or team warm up all the way out easy going out, and then when they come back in and start shortening their distance, that's when they're throwing harder.
Right.
So we're stretching out, and then intensity throwing back in on pull downs, and the general health of our players is very good. But the caveat's this: some kids who have been playing a lot during this COVID period versus some guys in our club that haven't been playing as much. You have to monitor each player and match them up with somebody that is throwing with the same intensity.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you have somebody who's really, can throw it a long way and has good velocity, they shouldn't be playing with a player that doesn't have as strong as arm, because
that kid's gonna try and keep up.
Exactly. Yeah. That's an injury that I've seen happen.
Yeah.
And I always try to match our players up now, because this dead arm period that athletes go through during the year, it's happening too often with too many athletes and too many injuries because of their intensity of we got to play every weekend. And playing every weekend is stressful because players warm up initially, Aaron, on a weekend game. Then maybe they're playing a doubleheader. Okay, so they warm up initially, play their game, and then they go back out again to warm up. And it shouldn't take more than 5 to 10 throws to get the arm loose again, or, maybe 15 at the most.
Right.
These kids go out and start the throwing program and play long toss again. And that's where the injuries happen. It's overuse then. You have to really monitor. I'd say guys go out and play catch from about 45, 60, 70 feet. Get your arm loosened up again. And then when you go back to your position, loosen up a little bit. But it's too much intensity. You said the key word. Intensity is too great at a short window of time. Injury can happen.
Yeah. That's a good point. Well, I guess what our listeners will want to know is, how do we get out of that hole?
Right.
On the training side, I think if you're already at that point where the arm is dead and you're having some pain, you've got to address those issues first. So rest, ice,
right,
and ice would be right after activity, but warm, moist heat tends to help a lot. One of the things that I always tell my athletes when they're having those sorts of injuries is, take a towel, soak it. You can even soak it in Epsom salt, put it in a microwave for about a minute or two.
I like that.
And then wrap the arm.
I like
that warm, moist heat will penetrate, and then it'll allow those muscles to loosen up and start to break down some of that tension that's in there that leads to the tendonitis. And then from that standpoint, then you can start to do your stretching modalities, your foam roller, lacrosse ball, those sorts of things, because now the muscles are going to be more receptive. They're going to be a lot more supple, and let you get deeper into working the muscles, tendons, ligaments, that sort of thing. And it promotes the blood flow. So
I love that. I love that idea, Aaron. That's excellent.
I would suggest that. Now, with that said, you got to understand that a lot of these have to do with the endurance of the arm. So the endurance actually has to be built up.
Right.
So that means there needs to be some sort of exercise protocol, whether it's banding, whether it's light dumbbells, those sorts of things, where now you're getting the reps in and building up the endurance. So I'm not talking about full on, grab a 30-pound dumbbell.
We're talking about a 3-pound weight, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
I'm talking
3-pound
about
weight.
Something that might, depending on where you are in your stage of development, might be anywhere from 2 pounds to 6 pounds.
Okay.
And you're doing high reps, but you're doing them slowly, not fast, and you're doing them full range of motion, and you're doing them correctly. The one thing, I like the Jaeger bands, and I've known Alan Jaeger for, 20-some years.
You and I both.
And I believe in what he's doing, but the problem is with the Jaeger bands is these kids, because it's such a regularly routinely done sort of thing, they kind of just sleepwalk through it. They just do it. They don't necessarily engage themselves on how those movements need to be done. They kind of just rep them out.
Right.
And that takes away the value of the J-band circuit.
Right.
Those movements should be a lot smoother, a lot more controlled, and you should be understanding the muscle groups that you're trying to activate during those. So
I have a question with you on that, Aaron, because I think it's really important, because I'm really into understanding players' arms.
Yeah.
How long do you think banding should last? If you have a set of 10 to 15 exercises, I'm just going to throw that range out there. what is your recommendation, your professional recommendation? Because I think it's important for our parents and our listeners out there to understand that, you know, it takes time to do it. You just can't just rush through it.
Right. I mean, I see guys do their banding routine in like 5 minutes, you know? I mean, literally. I mean, it's bam, 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 bam. And I'm like, no. You got to slow that down. And again, you got to learn to activate the right muscles, because the thing with the banding sometimes is other muscles can take over.
Gotcha.
So you might be trying to work the rotator cuff, but because you're going so fast, you're not really working in the right position, you're engaging other muscles. So you're never really hitting the rotator cuff.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying you've got to do them slower. And that's one reason why I like the hand weights, because the hand weights give you a little bit more feedback and allows you to track and trace the movement. At least it creates a little bit more awareness if you're thinking about what you're doing.
Yeah, if you're thinking about it, right, exactly.
So I tend to like banding. I think is great because it's economical. You can bring it with you, that sort of thing. But in terms of the strength building aspect and the endurance building aspect, I think most athletes will probably be better served with the dumbbells. Yeah,
and the movement pattern with the dumbbells,
exactly.
So you can trace it, understand how your muscles are feeling,
right?
Because you get better feedback, probably, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
and it automatically slows everything down.
Gotcha.
Automatically slows everything down.
Oh, I like that.
So that would be my suggestion is get back onto some of the small strength exercises, and then also you want to start to do your stretching. You want to stretch your pecs, your shoulder girdle, your lats, and your back and everything, right. and get the body being supple again. Okay, because again, a lot of these injuries stem from fatigue, and then once you get fatigued, you get tight. And then what happens is athletes continue to try and work through this tightness, and then that slowly starts to turn into tendonitis, because what happens is the muscle gets to the point where it just fails and it stays tight.
It's fatigue.
So you've got to kind of work your way back from that.
Yeah. I tell you, that's a great way to wrap it up today, Aaron, is you give them, the listeners, the parents, the players, the understanding of how to get their arm back to some sort of conditioning, and also how to get back to health, general health there. So again, this is EJ, the brand.
And Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source. We'll see you.